I would like to call to order the Nashua Board of Education Budget Committee meeting for Thursday, February 13th, 2020, 6:34 p.m. in the Nashua High School North Boardroom. Mr. Garino is here. Ms. Johnson?
Present.
Ms. Ziem?
Here.
Ms. Bishop?
Here.
Ms. Giglio?
Here.
Ms. Raymond will join us later. Ms. Brown?
Here.
Ms. Timmons?
Here.
Ms. Oden?
Here.
Also with us tonight, we have Mr. Donovan. We also have Mr. Rossio from Transportation, Mr. Smith from Plant Operations, and Mr. McCulkin from Nashua Technology Center. And excuse me if I pronounced your name incorrectly. We're going to have miss anybody? I don't think so. We're going to start with transportation. We're having our presentations. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rossio.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good seeing you this year. Not on Valentine's Day, because the last two were on Valentine's Day. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we do in the transportation department and the budget. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So talk a little bit about the budget tonight and some of the additional, besides for going home to school transportation, there's a lot of other things we handle out of the transportation department. Currently, we're running 52 big buses for regular education students, 37 specialized transportation buses, transport about 7,500 kids a day, and in total, AM and PM combined, give over 2 million rides a year. Those are the two budget lines that I have here. You'll notice for this budget 2021, it says TBD. We are putting together an RFP. We'll be going out to bid for the contract for next year. Where do we go? These are the schools within Nashua, all the public schools, the Brentwood program in Clearway, 3 Catholic schools, and we also transport to the 2 charter schools in town. Transport any student that lives 1 mile from more than a mile from an elementary school or more than 2 miles from a middle school or high school. Students who live in transition and require transportation to their home school, and that may be a homeless student that was maybe at Dr. Crisp and is now on the Birch Hill catch basin, or maybe it was at Dr. Crisp and is in Manchester, okay? And then we transport any student that has transportation written into their IEP. Additional things provided, the high school shuttles between the blocks, between north and south, late buses, vocational ed buses. We run a fairly extensive summer school program with ELL, SPED, and the Power Scholars. 3 terms you'll hear a lot in my office, route, run, and tear. And I just put this in because a lot of new board members here. A route is typically made up of 3 runs. So a route would generally be a high school run, a middle school run, and an elementary school after that. A tier is basically what time they're going. And you can see like tier 1 is all the green up there, it's the high schools. Tier 2 is in the reddish color, and tier 3. Big part of the budget is out-of-district transportation. We go to all these schools and actually quite a few more outside of Nashua. You can see some of them quite a bit away. We've even got a kid this year up at Tilton. There's a school up by Tilton. A lot of these in Mass. It's quite expensive. Some of these buses may have several kids on it. Some of these buses may have only 1 student on it. First Student is our current contractor for everything within the city, special ed and big buses. Contract negotiations, like I said, we're going to be putting an RFP out. The other bus companies listed are some of the companies I will use to contract for the schools that I just showed previously, whether it's going to Massachusetts or out towards the seacoast. One of the issues we have is a national school bus driver shortage. It's not just Nashua, it's not just New England, it is national. And different parts of the country go as far as calling it severe or desperate. It's been quite a challenge here locally. And it's just another slide, pretty much says same thing here. Even most of it is a moderate driver shortage. So this is from 2018. It was a study they did last year, and you can see the school bus wages, drivers' wages on the far left, around $16. With that same license, they could go out and drive a transit bus or a heavy truck and make more money. So it's one of the contributing factors to why there's a national shortage. I don't think it's the only factor, but it's definitely one of them. So as we go forward, and you'll see that First Student has just signed a contract with their drivers, and they're going to be upwards of $25 an hour. And hopefully that's going to get them to be able to recruit and retain and get rid of the shortage. It absolutely does come with a cost, though. And that's sort of going to set the market. Started with Providence, got a pretty big increase 12 to 16 months ago, and it really started. All the different unions throughout the Northeast have been trending that way. We do charge for bus tickets for the high school kids. Full-year ticket costs $65. Half-year ticket is $32.50, and students in the free and reduced lunch will get a free or reduced pass. And currently, we have about 2,100 folks who've purchased tickets. Some of the challenges, as mentioned, is driver shortage. The district-wide special ed programs always seem to be growing, including your pre-K. And by nature, those runs are inefficient compared to a regular bus because if, for example, Charlotte may have a special ed program for autistic kids, well, if a student's living down by Maine Dunstable, instead of going to Maine Dunstable, we've got to bus them all the way to Charlotte. So just generally, they're more inefficient than a big bus. The charter schools are challenging. They cover the whole city. If they're in the city, we've got to bring them to the charter schools, and their time of day does not fit neatly with our time of day. So I'll give you an example. ASD goes to school same time as our middle schools at 8 in the morning. Our middle schools get out around 2:40, and ASD gets out at 3:30. So when you're trying to tear them up, it takes some working. And then the transitional students is always a challenge. Like I said, it could be Manchester. We've had Methuen, Mass. This year, Drake, Concord, New Hampshire, trying to set that up. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids are moving rapidly. So just trying to get them where they're in school and not interrupt their schooling is quite a challenge. And what's new in transportation? For the first time ever, we are able to go with online ticket sales. This went live in January. It's working out great. It does give the parents a credit card or debit card option that they've been looking for a long time. I use software for all the transportation called Edulog. It's from Educational Logistics. We're getting our first software upgrade in 14 years this spring. So it's going to have a lot more functionality, and I'm really looking forward to it. Also this spring, we're working with First Student to implement the First View Parent application, as well as a district dashboard. The First View Parent app will be an app for parents that if they sign up for it and download the app, they can get notifications on where their school bus is, if it's running late. They can see if it leaves the school in the afternoon, see when it arrives at school in the morning, so it's really handy. And the district dashboard is going to be great for myself because I can literally just open up the computer in the morning and all the routes will be there, and it's going to be green or red. If they're green, they're on time. If they're red, they're late, and you can see it just like that. So looking forward to that. And the biggest change of the year is due to a change in state law, we will begin transporting kindergarten students next year for the first time. So my hope is to do that budget neutral, and looking at it, I believe I can. I'm gonna have to move some things around. The only caveat to that is we just opened up kindergarten registration, so I was using the current kindergartners from this year with all the other kids from next year rolled up, so it's not exact. I can't imagine it'll be terribly different, but if it were that scenario, we could have done it this year without adding any buses.
Okay, that's good.
Absolutely.
Whoops. Okay, I'm just wondering, I know that the kindergarten students have different hours than the rest of the school. Are they going to get their own buses, or will they be traveling
No,
with
the
the
only way to do
other?
this budget neutral, we're going to sync all the hours up.
So they'll be going with the first through the fifth grade?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rossio. We have other questions and
Well,
comments?
I
Go ahead,
didn't know if
Ms.
we were waiting until after you finished. I actually had two that I had written down.
Go right ahead. Yep, he's
Okay.
finished with his.
One, when you were talking about the schools that are not public, that we pay for the transportation, I would like to know if we have ever figured out exactly how much it cost us for the special education. I was trying to figure out what we pay for charter schools in total and what we pay for public school in total. But when it came to transportation, I had no figures to do that with. So that's kind of why I'm looking for that figure, and maybe that's something you haven't done and might need to do, or?
So is it, because I've got a figure on there, I'll go back.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, about 121,000, and that includes the Catholic schools as well, as charter schools.
So do
Now,
we
when
know
you-
how many students that is?
Roughly 3.
I'm
And
sorry.
do they give us do they contribute to that, or do we just bus them at no cost?
Bus them at no cost, state law.
And that's to her question, that's why I'm trying to do this, because you couldn't really compare apples to apples unless you actually broke down all of these different costs.
I can get you exactly how many students
If
total it
you
is.
would, I
I think we're
would.
going to be probably 600 or so off the top of my head, but I'd rather get you a very
Per
accurate
student,
number.
or 600 students, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, I'll wait to hear. Then you want me to give you my second
Yep,
question?
absolutely.
When you were talking about the employees and how they're hiring them on at this, it's a significant increase.
Absolutely.
And so I wondered about the employees who, for instance, I have a person that I know who has been driving bus for 20 years. So how will that affect, how will they make it, is that 20-year bus driver going to get the same thing as the one-year bus driver?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, all those folks have got
I
moved
heard
up.
I'd quit.
Those folks got moved up to the top of range. I think a brand-new hire coming in is going to start at 2150 or so, and then after a year, get to the 25.
So you're saying that she will make the same as the first,
Yes.
she'll be equal, but not, yeah, so it always concerns me that we don't seem to value experience. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else with any questions or comments?
I have another question kind of about the students going to the private institutions. Are legality-wise, we are allowed to charge our high school students, but we can't charge elementary school?
Right.
Like state costs, you have to, so once these kids at the private schools, once they get to a high school level, we do charge them a bus pass?
Yes, Bishop Girton and ASD has some high schoolers, so they do get charged.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I just want to ask another question about that, because I know I asked about that maybe 25, 30 years ago about busing to like the parochial schools. Now, you said, is that state or federal law? State law?
Yes.
State law. So we're obligated to do it no matter what.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Brown.
I know this is, I'm just really curious about this situation. Is there a certain distance that we're, like, that they can go anywhere in the state and we still have to pay for it? Like, or even out of state? 'Cause I mean, they've even got a couple of places in Massachusetts.
Those are special ed students.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay. The charter schools are just Nashua students going to the charter schools within Nashua.
But to her point, you do have to, if they're special education, no matter where they go, you have to pay for it, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yes, that's a biggie. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Ms. Brown.
Bishop,
Bishop, I'm
It's okay.
sorry. I apologize.
it's a compliment. The special ed students that are going out of district, now because they could possibly be getting like PT, OT, speech, that kind of stuff that would normally fall under more of a Medicaid type of cost, are we able to looking at Medicaid CTS funding as part of a transportation?
So we give them our invoices, and they can use that part of the trip just for that student. So if there's 10 students on a bus, say, and just make it easy, the bus costs $100, they could write off that $10 for that particular student, and then add it in to see if he goes over the cap for reimbursement.
Thank you.
Yep.
So that, go ahead, Ms. Oden.
No, I was going to say, just to clarify what Mrs. Ziem was asking about, it's not up to us what the bus drivers get
No, it's
paid.
not.
It's up to first student.
That's correct.
So we don't have any control of that.
Go ahead, Ms. Ziem.
I did know that. And I'm sure that's still a big raise for them. I don't know. It's one of my Achilles heels. It bugs me, but thank you anyway. Appreciate it.
I have a question, and I know we get state and federal dollars for other programs in the district. Do we get any state and federal dollars for transportation, for buses?
We don't. The only thing would be, again, going back to that
Medicaid?
cap. If the special ed student would go over the Medicaid cap, there would be some reimbursement.
So basically, the dollars that are going into our buses are coming from families who pay for the,
Yep, it's coming out of the operating budget.
and then out of the operating budget. Ms. Brown?
Have you done any calculations to see if we synced up the schedules of the charter schools, how much of a cost savings that would be for the buses? I mean, because we're talking about $500,000
My
here.
understanding is I cannot sync those up.
Right, you can't, has anyone ever talked about that option?
When they first opened up, we had those discussions.
And would it be a savings, or would it be
I
not
don't know
really?
the savings.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Ms. Ziem?
I'm not sure what you're saying to her. Can you, I'm slow. I'm sorry.
So for example, ASD goes to ASD has a different time than us. So if you look at it here, and you just look at Pennachuck, the first school in red, they get out at 2:43, but they start at 8 in the morning. And if you go down next to last, Academy of Science also starts at 8 in the morning, but they get out at 3:30. So when I'm trying to make the tiers and the routes all fit, it's challenging.
Yes,
So-
Ms. Ziem, and then Ms. Bishop.
I'm sorry, so going to her point, which I thought was a really good one, who would control that? It would have to be those charter schools, correct?
Charter schools, and to be honest with you, ASD is cognizant of that, and they get out at 3:30. They cut a deal with me to get the buses there as soon as I could, around 3:45. So you'll see a lot of the schools, especially Birch Hill, because it's up that end of town, gets out at 3:25. So try and get there, Birch Hill, get out, drop some kids off, and go right to ASD.
Thank you.
So it's almost like creating a little bit of a fourth tour. So they've been, fourth tier, they've been pretty flexible with us. They're reluctant to move their day completely, though.
Ms. Bishop?
The charter schools in town, we're just busing Nashua students
That's
to the
correct.
Nashua, so we're not going out to the different districts and picking them up and bringing them back in. Okay.
Ms. Ziem?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So if it's the two schools at the bottom, where are they actually located, may I ask? I don't actually know where
Academy
they...
of Science Design is up the top of Amherst Street, and Micro Society is on West Hollis Street.
Oh, thank you.
Very good.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Rossio. Next up, we're going to hear from Mr. Smith, Plant Operations. I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I'm Sean Smith. I'm a Plant Operations Director. I'm in my 23rd year here. Still love my job, having a great time. So I love a challenge, and I get it every day. And I got a great boss over here, so. And a very supportive Board of Ed, so let's cover it all. I didn't do any overhead slides. You didn't put it in here, did you? Or did you? I didn't send you anything?
No.
Okay. So I'm just going to read from the paper that you hopefully received. So I'm on page, mine's numbered 4A in the upper right-hand corner. So in plant operations, we take care of the repair and maintenance of all our schools and ancillary buildings. So that's 17 schools plus the administration building. My complex, don't do too much with the Title I at the church, but Brentwood, we do some repair work. You may have heard we had a backup at Brentwood today, but it's a rental facility, so the owner actually came in and is taking care of it. So we're also responsible for cleaning both the buildings and the exterior grounds. We maintain all the school grounds, athletic fields, the parking lots, bus loops, sidewalks, playgrounds, all that. Actually, when it comes, particularly for the new members, when it comes for snow removal and treatment of roadways and whatnot, we share that with Park and Rec. So my crew takes care of the two high schools and Pennachuck Middle School and Ledge Street. Then Park and Rec takes care of all the rest. And we work together. You know, sometimes we get ahead of the game and we help them out and vice versa. They are somewhat constrained in helping us at times because they're also responsible for portions of the city streets. So they have a lot on their plate as well. We also take care of some sidewalks. We've, between us and Park and Rec and the rest of the street department and the transportation, the bus company, we all have sidewalk plows. And we've divvied up the city into sectors based upon how many plows we have and how many people we can put in them. So we're also responsible for safety and security, including all the crossing guards, construction and renovation planning and oversight is a very big part of my job, and I bring in parts of my staff in to help it as needed. We've done an awful lot of work with energy saving measures over the years. Back when I first started, we hired a company called, they were EEI. Now they go by a different name, but basically we started first by changing the behaviors of people. You know, turn off the lights. That's a very simple one. We kind of went beyond that. We hired a guy we ended up calling the Prince of Darkness. He even gave him a Darth Vader helmet, and he walked around in schools at nighttime with a flashlight, and he listened. That's all he had to do is listen for fan motors that shouldn't be running in the middle of the night. So we just made incremental changes, at least initially that way, and then we started to get more into actual physical changes to our schools. So an easy one that you're probably familiar with lately are LED lights. We were waiting for the technology to catch up with us, and it did, and we've systematically started to go through our schools to replace those. You'll hear probably next Monday night about solar proposal that we have. You've may have also heard that we've hired an engineering company called EEI, Energy Efficiency Investments, I think is what it stands for. And they are looking specifically at the two high schools and are proposing projects at each of about $3.6 million. That was actually before the prior Board of Ed, this last calendar year. So we had to do a little more work. We're working actually with the mayor's staff to fine-tune that, whether we want to do a leasing option or bond it. So that little preview of coming attractions will be fairly soon, actually. So first and foremost, we have to provide a suitable and safe learning environment for our students and, of course, our staff. We have to meet all codes, be it city, state, and federal. Whenever the schools have their periodic state accreditation, we are part of that process. We provide a lot of information for the principals to submit. So just a general note on the overall budget that's being presented. I requested a 3% increase in all our supply lines. For the most part, they were all 0%. I know you have a lot of a lot of balls you have to juggle. I mean, there's a lot of demands on the budget. And healthcare expenses are supposed to go up. So there's a lot of demands on the budget. I get that. Just know that if I have zero, it's effectively a cut. I talked to our construction manager and asked them, what are you seeing for increases in your supply lines? And it's about 3 to 5%, the exception of drywall, which for some reason is going up 25%. I'm not sure why that is, but we don't use that much drywall. If we're going to create a new space within the school, it's typically a calming room. That's where we use drywall. So we don't use a lot of it, but it's still a factor. Well, I'll just keep on going with that thought. So as you get into the various lines here, there actually were a few that did change. Wages are up based on based on union increases. So that's mostly contractual. We did shift her around. Maybe Dan could speak to this one a little bit better. The wages, the temporary seasonal went down $50,000. It isn't really a $50,000 reduction in my program. It's how we accounted for it. Is that a proper way to say that?
Excuse me, are you on page 4B now?
I'm on 4A still.
Oh, you're still on 4A, okay.
So I'm under the operating budget line items. So I just want to highlight where the changes are from this past year.
Okay.
Contractual services went up slightly. I'll get into that a little bit more. Buildings and grounds went down slightly. These conferences and seminars, which is number 16 on that very bottom of that page, I had to go up somewhat again because of contractual requirements for a gas fitters license. We're now required under the contract to help them maintain those gas fitter licenses. Everything else, so I'm on page 2 of 4A. Everything else remained at 0. And I'll say this to you as far as my budget goes. We've been treated fairly well. I really can't complain. And I can understand, keeping us at 0 with all the other demands you have on you. I can probably live with that for a year. But just remember me next year when I'm back here. Hopefully I'm back here. We've done this before. I think in between 17 and 18, we had a 0% increase for the most part. So it's not unheard of. I am concerned about our electrical supply line because we've already exceeded the entire amount that we set aside for the entire year. I think we can buffet that somewhat with our other supply lines that are running behind that. But security systems we installed back, 6 years ago, are now 6 years old, and those are starting to fail. And so that's been one of the big increases that's one of the reasons why this electrical supplies have gone on hold at this point. I actually asked for a $50,000 supply line just for security, but that didn't survive the initial cut here at least.
I kind of have a question related to that. With the new switches that are going in at the high schools, do we need a bigger contingency for that, or do you feel like would that fall under that category?
That is an IT question, because I don't get involved in switches.
But that won't affect the electrical.
Okay.
Let's see if there's anything else on that page. I don't think so. So the third page of 4A, funding sources. So as you all know, we have the middle school project impending. It's around $120 million in round numbers. We've been receiving public infrastructure grants for security projects. We hope to get a lot of those done this summer. 2 of those were at Fairgrounds Middle School in Pennachuck, and those are now part of that project, for the middle school project. For the most part, those are adding cameras or creating vestibules. So when you come into school, we want to create a secure space for kind of a holding area for the person coming in before we push the button and let them in. You go to some of our schools now, they get past that first door, they go anywhere. I mean, a lot of the schools try to put some chains across to force you into the office. So we want to put doors. And we actually have the grant for that. So we have the money to do it. So it's just a matter of getting that done. Deferred maintenance, a little bit of a sore subject for me. I'll get to it in a minute. But we've received $100,000 for several years now. If you take a look at one of the exhibits, I think it's 4D, if you add up all our deferred maintenance, it comes to $7.2 million. And we received $100,000 this year and the year before, I think the year before that. So if I didn't add a single thing to deferred maintenance, that takes 72 years. It's not sustainable. And what happens when you do that is you end up with construction projects. A number of years ago, these projects were building up at Charlotte, Ledge, and Fairgrounds. So we ended up doing construction projects of those. That was about $3 million, $3.5 million each. Then we hit Broad Street and Sunset. Same thing. The projects just keep on building up, and those projects were $10 million plus. So the middle school project seems kind of small, large numbers-wise, but the same thing's going to happen again. I mean, I'll get to that particular spreadsheet, but there's already schools lined up after the middle school project is done that we'll have to consider. So 4B is my spreadsheet. I've been using this for years. It shows a 4-year history plus the request for this year. This is FY 2020 Plan Operations Budget Bill. That should be 21, actually. So you see where the increases that I requested are, for the most part, they're 3%. I did put 0 in a number of them as well. Personnel-wise, I don't even know if that's part of this particular subject, although I'm aware we've asked for a lot of teachers and that sort of thing, which is a good thing. We did reduce by 10 custodians a couple of years ago, district-wide, and I was asking for, last 2 years I've asked to start to restore that a little bit. I've told both Board of Eds, it's up to you. If you're happy with the cleanliness of the schools, we're good. But if you see some problem areas, then maybe you want to consider adding some stuff back. The other item there, HVAC mechanic, we cut that during some budget woes back in 2012, and that particular position was responsible for preventive maintenance. So preventive maintenance is very important. I mean, it's the difference between being proactive and reactive. And things breaking catastrophically, or you catch them just before they go. So,
Can I just ask?
We've worked around that. I'll just finish that one thought. We've worked around that. I think we're doing okay with preventive maintenance, but it's still it's a place where I can see to improve my department.
Are we on 4B now?
We're on 4B. I'm sorry.
We're on 4B. Okay, Ms. Johnson, you had a quick question?
Yeah, I have a couple questions here. I'd like to, and I'm going to ask this of Mr. Donovan also. By the time, when we're done with everybody who comes before us, I'd like to see what the actual amount in the line items have been spent to date. And then before we finish wrapping up the budget, I'd like to see where we're at that point in time, how much money has been expended from each line item, because I want to make sure that we've used the money appropriately that is being spent, and see where we are, where we should be at this point in time. Mr. Smith, and you and I go back a long way. I think I was on the board when we hired the energy manager.
Yes.
To turn off all those lights and on and everything. Okay, I'd like to get from you, if you would be kind enough, I'd like to see, because I hear about all this deferred maintenance, what your top 5 priorities are in the deferred maintenance.
Sure.
What the cost factors are, and what hasn't been done that needed to be done. I'm not going to say we're going to give you the money, but I just want to see what hasn't been done that's in that top priority. Does that sound fair?
Yeah. I remember last year at the committee, Mr. Smith did give us a list of, we've had from time to time a list of deferred maintenance. I've seen it.
Your package tonight.
Oh, and it's in the package tonight. So we have
That shortly.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, each year this board has been updated on deferred maintenance. I've seen them previous ones, and when you say that you've seen this keep growing and growing. I've seen it with you. Yeah, I've seen that. But that's a good, and I'm sorry to interrupt your, I'm gonna give it back to you in a minute, but as far as deferred maintenance goes, and this was a question that came up before, but can we, that's capital improvements, some of that outside the budget, and some of it is inside our operating budget, because the smaller ones you try to knock off inside the operating budget,
So
right?
projects that are 50,000 and less, we've
Been knocking them off with the budget, but those projects are mostly outside the operating budget, and we could actually ask the city to put those on the capital improvements plan. Can we do that? I've seen them actually on, I've looked at the city's capital improvement plan, and I've seen school projects on there. So that's where we really need to try to get the city to give us money outside the operating budget for this. This is actually investments in capital improvements and outside the budget, and it's growing and growing and growing. So it's.
If I could
Go
just.
ahead, Mr.
So
Smith.
there
I
is a
don't want to
process for
confuse
that.
the issue.
No, you're absolutely right. There is a
Yep.
process for that, and we develop a capital plan that includes not only the renovation and construction, but all the smaller projects, so those that are above 50 but don't reach the point of having to send it to joint special. And in the middle of January this year, Mr. Dunham and I went to the Capital Improvement Committee and took the deferred maintenance plan that this board approved back in December and presented to them. And basically, we asked for deferred maintenance money for the middle school project money, which was kind of already set at that point. And we asked for energy money. I think there's one other thing. But yes, there are school projects in there every single year.
Yeah.
And then, so that then goes to, that committee is only, they can only recommend. So then it goes to the alderman, it goes to the mayor, and then I guess the mayor, well, between the two of them, they decide how much deferred maintenance money we get.
And we've only been getting $100,000 outside our operating budget for this. It's up to 7.2 million, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have 7.2 million in capital improvements that we need that's outside our operating budget, and we've been getting $100,000 per year. So that's what's going on. And then Mr. Donovan, thank God for Mr. Donovan, as Mr. Moshe would always say, has been taking money out of the operating budget when he can and getting some of those smaller projects done. So I'm going to let you conclude your presentation. Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, go ahead. All right, well, first I'll go to Ms. Brown because I saw her, and then Ms. Oden.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Two quick questions, and I'm totally impressed with your breadth of knowledge, by the way. How many custodians do we currently have?
How many custodians?
Yeah,
92.
92. So this is like a 10%, or no, 3%.
It was 102, now it's
You want to
92.
get 3 back from the 10 we dropped a few years ago, okay. And my other question was, I do think that the preventive maintenance on the HVAC is very important. And how are we currently doing it? Are we contracting that out, or are we having maintenance, general maintenance handle it?
It's a combination. So I have 5 in-house HVAC mechanics. One of them is assigned to each of the high schools. That's full-time at each high school, and the other 3 are district-wide. In addition to that, for the controls piece, so the software, if you will, that's contracted out. We have 2 primary contractors. One is Control Technologies, and the other one's Siemens. So that's a fairly significant part of the budget.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Oden had a quick question, and then I'll let Mr. Smith conclude his presentation.
I don't know how quick mine is. When you talked about the schools and the custodians, how clean they are, that's up to us as we walk through. I know visiting the schools, first thing I look at is the floor. Some were in better shape than others. I was told there was extra wax at some schools, and they got to wax them again. I have been in some schools that were not as what I would consider clean as others. But I'm not in the schools a whole lot, so I'm going to ask you, what do you see when you go into the schools? Do you have a checklist?
I kind of start, we do have checklists, but I don't, they're all up here right now. I do the same thing. I start with the floors. I tend to walk around, look at the floors first, then I look up. I try to cover the whole thing. I mean, everybody gets to the main entrance. That's your first impression of the school. It can be somewhat dependent on personnel in the school, because like anything else in society, we have a whole range of how good our custodians are. Keep in mind also time of year when you go in the schools. So this time of year, salt and sand, it just does a number on our floors. And it really kills the wax that we've put down there. Again, particularly at the main entrance. We try walk-off mats, so try to kick off that stuff before it really gets in the school. But it's a lot of it still gets in. I see the little things. I see the scuff marks on the baseboard along the hallways. I see chip paint, things like that. My impression of the schools right now is the same as what you just said. There's some that are very good, some that could be better. I know where I'd put the 3 custodial positions. I know which schools are probably shorthanded at this point. Probably, I don't want to embarrass any particular school, so I won't say which ones those are tonight, but does that answer your question?
Somewhat. What do you do to a school that is not up to snuff?
My supervisors, so I have 2 custodial supervisors. One of them supervises all the elementary schools and 1 high school, and the other one, the 3 middle schools and the other high school. And so that's where it starts first. They sit down with the individuals and go over any deficiencies and where to pick it up. We're at times at the mercy of people being out sick. This time of year particularly. We do have an overtime budget, but we try to manage that. So if somebody's out for one particular night, we may not fill in that. It's not a one-for-one. If they're out for a week, then we'll definitely try to get somebody there. When we have people out long-term, then we try to wait until they're almost out of time, but we can't do that. We bring in temps to help out. So a lot of times it's a manpower or girl power issue. Sometimes it requires a pat in the back or kick in the behind.
Okay. We used to check air quality. I can remember Jeanette Katopoulos. Do we have anybody checking the air quality in our schools?
As needed. I mean, we have all the instrumentation still. My staff, and particularly my staff, particularly with the middle school project, I tend to be somewhat desk-bound, but they're out there all the time and talking to the staff. And if we hear of an issue, then we definitely test. But do we go around to every single school and test? No, we don't do that.
When was the last time that was done?
Well, we've gone around to every single school. I don't remember. It's been a long time. Maybe when Jeanette was here.
Oh, that's years ago.
That was years ago, yes.
And the energy manager, I think Prince of Darkness, was that the nickname?
Yes.
Yes. Have we replaced that position or?
Yes, but it's been replaced on a part-time basis.
Okay.
So it's one of the individuals that supervises the middle schools, and one of the high schools is the energy manager and also supervises the warehouse. So they have a lot on their plate.
So do we have somebody reminding teachers when they leave for vacation to shut the computers down?
Not as well as the Prince of Darkness used to, but.
Okay, he used to come around
we
and
do send stuff out.
leave notes.
Yes.
I remember that.
So it used to say, oops, if he caught you with you leaving your light on.
One last question. Do you have any openings for custodians? Are you shy any?
Yes, in fact, we just posted openings at Bicentennial and Broad Street Elementary.
Okay.
But it's fairly constant. I mean, it's not a huge turnover, but we do have openings pretty much all the time.
How long do you think it will take you to fill that?
So it is a unionized environment. When you post a position, the current custodians have the first shot at it. It has to be out there for 10 days. And then if you don't get anybody from in-house, then you go to the outside. And what we've often done now, we've had so many people out long-term that we have been hiring temporaries to fill those positions. So it's really kind of a free look at them, because whenever you hire somebody, they have 90 days. That's the probationary period. So when we have a temporary, we've probably exceeded the 90 days before we even start that 90 days. So our new hires tend to come from the temporaries.
Okay.
And then we bring in brand-new people in to become new temporaries. It just kind of rolls over like that.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, defer, oh, there's more questions.
Well, thank you. I remember when last I was here, going to your point about sometimes it has to rise to the level of where the people are so disenchanted with the condition that they come and tell us. And I remember the last one where the teachers we had was wonderful. It actually encouraged me that they cared so much that they bothered to come down here, because it's not the fun thing to do. And that was Mount Pleasant.
Yes.
Can you tell me if Mount Pleasant is in what condition they're in?
I would say cleanliness-wise, it's okay. I wouldn't give it a 5-star rating, but it's okay. The school itself is in need of an overhaul. It was last renovated around 1990, give or take a year. So we have a lot of peeling paint up in high, like the stairwells. You go in there, you look up, you're going to see paint peeling. So that takes specialized scaffolding to get up and do that. I know the head custodian does do painting in the summertime or when we have breaks, but that's one of the first things I noticed in there. We actually had the architect do an assessment of Mount Pleasant, and it was in our queue of schools to renovate, and then the middle school project kind of overtook that, because we're going to do Mount Pleasant, Main D, and Birch Hill. But Elm Street was in bad enough shape, it was time to do something with that school, so we had picked something to go first. But yeah, Mount Pleasant would definitely be on near the top
So
of my list.
when you look at Elm Street, how far out does that put us before we will even be able to consider the work on another school, whether it be Mount Pleasant or 5 years? Is that?
If you'll allow me, I'll be getting to that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right, one more quick question, and then we'll have to let them continue.
How often do you clean the air filters in the schools? Since we don't have anybody, Jeanette Katopoulos, coming in anymore to do the air quality, how often do we clean the air filters?
We replace the air filters
Of
3
course, I
times.
mean, replace them
Replace them 3 times a year.
3 times a year.
Yep.
And
And my maintenance foreman, one of my assistant directors, monitors that. He has a form that goes out to the head custodians. They have to fill it out, tell them how many they need, and then they have to send it back in. And once they've put them in, even when they replace the filter, they have to put the date on it and initial it. So if we want to do a spot check, we can check that filter.
okay, and when you have custodians out, they're out on disability, they're usually getting disability, paid disability?
Long-term, yes. They have sick leave.
Yeah.
They get 10 hours a month to use. After 7 days, they go on short-term disability, 10 days now. And then they have long-term disability too. I mean, it could be a workers' comp issue. It could be eye surgery, which is not workers' comp. Either way, they can end up on disability. Either way, they end up on FMLA.
So, Mr. Donovan, so when they're out on disability, we have a line in the budget for temporary, or how we paying the temporary help in the budget?
Well, we do have a line item in the budget. If they're out more than 10 days, they go on short-term disability. The short-term disability insurance picks up 60% of the cost, so we then only get 40% of the cost. So in a sense, you're saving some money on the salary, the 60%. So.
But we have a line item in the budget for the salary that we have to pay the temp, right? We have money put aside there.
We do.
Outside of regular salaries, it's,
Yes, but it's, like I said,
Yeah.
it's not as high as you might think, because then we get savings on the full-time
Right.
salary line.
right, I guess. And
Plus vacancies, and when
Right.
there's a vacancy, we're not paying anybody, so
Right, I just wanted to make it clear to, make sure everybody understands that when they're out, this is what happened. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, just back on deferred maintenance. So last summer, maybe last spring, the alderman gave us another $380,000 for deferred maintenance. That was on top of the $100,000 we got. That was through Alderman Dowd sponsored that legislation. Back when Ms. Johnson was on the alderman, I think we did fairly large, easily $500,000 of carpet removal. I think you probably sponsored that when you were an alderman, but it was mainly Elm Street. But we
Elm Street.
took care of a lot of other schools at the same time. So periodically, there are other inputs, but not very often. Let's see. I think I'll skip ahead to 4C. And these are our equipment requests. Notice in the budget, we had something around 80,000. I'd identified about 94,000 of equipment that I'd like to replace. So we categorize our equipment in 3 different levels. 1, it's basically dead, sitting there gathering dust. We can't use it anymore. 2, we know it's going to be at the end of its service life. That's upcoming. And then we can always improve how we do business. So there's new, fancy, better machines out there, and that's kind of the 3rd category. And as long as Dan and I have been together, we've always just kind of replaced the dead equipment. So never quite get there, but I want to say I think our equipment's a lot better than it used to be district-wide, because this board has put money into it. So that's what that sheet's about. So then we get to 4D, which is the deferred maintenance. And it's part of the capital improvement program that we submit to the city, calls for a 6-year outlook, and that's what we do with deferred maintenance as well. This one looks a little odd to me. Just bear with me a second. Because I'm saying it's odd to me because I'm pretty sure that when we put together our capital plan this year, every year I was asking for over $1 million. So this spreadsheet here, we're going to have to get you an update because this is the wrong spreadsheet. This one is so Mark Conrad, if you remember him, suggested we have $600,000 a year. He was saying that back around the year 2000. And we rarely got there. Maybe twice we got to 600,000. So you have the wrong spreadsheet, actually, which I apologize for. Because these projects, I know we did the tennis court repairs already at the North High School, so that's done. This looks like the wrong year gets sent, but. Yeah, so from year to year, if I get $100,000, then I have to shuffle the deck. So all those projects that don't get done this year, I push out to the out years. Oftentimes, it's the very next year. Sometimes I've had a little more chance to look at it, and I might move it out 2 years. So just off the top of my head, looking at this spreadsheet, the Board of Ed has already approved a couple of years ago a 4-year life extension program for the chiller units at the 2 high schools. So each high school has 2 chillers. Those provide air conditioning. And there's a big one and a small one. So we've systematically gone through this, and I'm pretty sure this coming year will be the last of those 4 years. Motion detectors, all our schools, with the exception of the high schools, have motion detectors. So that means once you get in school and somehow you've gotten past the outer envelope, we can still catch you if you have motion detectors. We have that everywhere except for the high schools. The tennis courts, we still have tennis courts at South High School. They're in pretty decent shape. So I would not have put that in for this coming year. You'll notice when you're looking at this, there are a couple items, both in 2020 and 2021, that are for Pennachuck Middle School. I'm hoping those get taken care of by the middle school project. But because it's existing, like Pennachuck, they're primarily focused on the 2 additions that are going to be on either side of the school. And then we'll have to see how much more we can get accomplished as we get further into the budget. So I apologize, we just have the wrong sheet in front of you. I mean, it's, what I did, what I changed is I put $1 million every year. Because the Mark Conrad number of 600, that was 2,000, so and I've increased that significantly.
But I think just to Ms. Johnson's question earlier, this process takes place every year, so he in fact ranks and prioritizes, here's the ones I'd like to get done this year, and then each year after that. So when he gives me this to review, I'll take a look at it and say, well, what happened to this one? Did you get it done? Did it move down a couple of years? Things like that. So there is a review of it every year. He just seems to add more things than get done. That's just the way it is.
That's life. I mean, the buildings, it's a big investment. I don't know how many millions of dollars we get invested in our schools total, but you just can't build them and forget about them. Anyway, so I just want to go over 4E. So we used to have to put our vehicle replacements into our operating budget, but then we were included in the city's Capital Equipment Reserve Fund, CERF. So we get our vehicles through that. So for example, in the current year, we're replacing a dump truck for the grounds crew, one of my supervisor's vehicles, and a box van which carries around our supplies from the warehouse. Next year, it's another box van, only this is going to be the food service van, and then we're going to replace the electrician's van. So we do this every year, and we just go out and get a couple bids. We send it into the city treasurer, it goes to the aldermanic finance committee, gets approved, and we get our vehicles sometime thereafter. So the last item I have on here is Exhibit 4F. One of the things we do every year is monitor our utility usage. And I provide about a 10-year history on that as well. The remarkable thing is the electrical use has actually gone down over time. I attribute that to our energy programs, to LED lights, to every time we do a renovation, we put in more efficient equipment. So a lot of reasons go into that. So both in terms of kilowatt usage and dollars, we're better off than we were 10 years ago, which is remarkable, I think. Those of you that were on the board are aware of this, the contractor, we had a 3-year contract for electricity, and they went bankrupt, and we had to do a quick turnaround and get some new quotes. We did that in November, December, and we now have a 2-year contract with Direct Energy, and they provide a rate, it's 0.528. Dan, even this sheet is wrong. It's not the one I sent in.
Yeah, it is.
No, because it says the locked-in rate of 0.528 runs from June 2017 to May 2020. So, I'm sorry, Dan's not wrong. I was looking at natural gas. The electrical, I'm sorry. I don't tell my boss I'm sorry very often, so it just, he is usually correct. How's that?
That's better.
Okay. So the bottom half of the page is the electrical, and the top half is natural gas. So really the same thing. So the natural gas has gone down both in therms, which is the unit we use, and in dollars. Electrical has gone down as well. Both of those programs due to our energy efforts. So we're recommending going with the same budget next year as we had this year. And for electricity, it's a very nominal increase from 2040, which was our actual use this past year, to $2,050,000 $50,000. And water, we spent what we budgeted this past year, so we're comfortable with keeping that the same. I think that's all I had.
Ms. Ziem?
I'm sorry. Going back to the question I had earlier about the timeline of, I guess it led my thinking to the question of how many capital improvement loans, like they're talking about 5 years for Elm Street, is that correct? I haven't had the review of that yet, so I'm wondering how many of those loans you would have out at a time.
Well, loans, as far as bonding,
Yes, thank you.
might rely on Mr. Donovan for part of that. We're very close now to paying off the high school bonds, which were taken out.
Was that
So the
20
city,
years?
when they approve a bond, that doesn't mean that's when you grab the money. You approve the bond, then Dave Fredette gets the, puts the bond on the street for how much he needs. So there's always a lag. So the high schools are almost off the books. Over the last 6 or 7 years, we did Lead Street, Fairgrounds, Charlotte, Broad Street, Sunset Heights. So those bonds, I believe, are all 20-year bonds. So we're kind of in the middle of those. Then we have the middle school project that was just approved.
Were they all individual bonds that you're talking about, Mr.? You know what I'm saying? Some of them are lumped together, right?
Some of them, I believe, Ledge and Fairgrounds are lumped together. Broad Street's a separate bond, Sunset's a separate bond, and I think Charlotte's either a rollover, or I'm not 100% sure on Charlotte, but
We did Ledge and Fairgrounds at the same time, so
Yes.
it'd probably be one bond. Charlotte was the,
that's the
Follow.
last bond that we got any help from the state on, the building aid from the state. That was the last one. We're hoping that program kicks back in and we get some help on the middle school.
So basically, we're saying around 5, right? Because that would be 5, right? I don't know, is there some kind of ceiling on, when I do my budget, forgive my simplicity of thought, but when I do my budget, I know that I have a ceiling of how much I can pay out in debt. But that's not the case in this case?
Well, it is at a city level. All the bonds are looked at the city level.
So it's all dependent on getting approved at the city level?
Sure, but it's also, they're looking at other things, like, for example, DPW may need a bond, or the police or the fire may need one.
Yes, the whole city.
If you look in the city budget book, which will be available in another probably 3 weeks, 3 weeks to a month, there's a page in there that'll show you when all the various bonds, a list of all of them and when they come due, and then the payments per year of principal and interest.
So it's really out of our control?
Yeah, exactly. It's more of a city-level control. This board can't approve a bond. It has to be done at the Board of Aldermen level.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. Most people don't understand that a lot of times when one bond is coming to and then you're going to bring on another, like what's happening with the school. So it's almost like nothing ended. You're just continuing, but it's a whole new bond that they're selling, that Mr. Fredette, because today's Thursday, on Tuesday, when we were talking about the solar panels, and we talked about the fact that 5-year lease and the 6-year, we could bond it over 10 years. And I asked, well, could you ask Mr. Fredette to please, with all that information, to give us how much the bond would cost? Because, they can bond a little piece at a time. Like if you see what they've asked for, they might ask for the full bond, but they're only going to sell what they need for that particular point of the construction. So that's why when we did this school in 2000, we started this school. Yeah, this opened in 2004. That's when the bond was complete, and then they started on the next one. So that's why you hear there's 20 years and 18 years that these bonds are coming due now, that they're done. So now that's when they look at the bigger projects again to bond some more. So it's complicated. I'm glad I sat on both boards because I understand it. But it's, these are projects, and Dave Fredette takes very good care to go out and sell the bonds and go back out and refinance it when he gets better rates with the bond. So we're very lucky to have him in the city.
And I guess if I can just add, we were also very lucky to have Brian McCarthy. I remember him saying that to me, almost identical to what you're saying. He said that with as many buildings as we have to constantly keep them in the loop moving forward and still can't keep up with them, as you have said. Thank you for making me a little smarter. Maybe before I die, I'll get there.
Thank you.
I'm trying to train Dan on construction stuff, too. He's now an expert in cement. So we're working on it.
Ms. Oden,
Thank you. I have a question. Do you have a list of things that should be done in a school every day, like cleaning the bathrooms has to be done every day, washing the cafeteria floor? Do you have a list of things
Do, yes.
that have to be done
Daily,
each
weekly,
day?
monthly, yes.
Oh,
yes.
okay, okay. Could I just get a list of things that have to be done each day? I'd like to see that. Thank you.
go ahead, Mr. Smith, and, yep.
So I neglected, somebody asked a question about the sequence of future renovation projects, like where was Mount Pleasant in the grand scheme of things. So if you go back to Exhibit 4D, pages 3 and 4 of that. Keep in mind, this isn't quite the right spreadsheet because it should start the column with 2021. But in general, we had, this was a year ago, so I had Elm Street kind of at the top of the list. And that was the renovation cost at that time. If you add up all those lines, it's around $66 million. We found out since it's more than that, which is part of the reason why we decided to build new. But then in the following years, I had Maine, Dunstable, Birch Hill, and Mount Pleasant for the next three. As placeholders, I mean, the dollar amounts for those schools is pretty similar. Mount Pleasant is actually 17 million. I did inflate those numbers for, okay, instead of doing it next year, we're going to be doing it 6 years from now. But we're, so we're in 2020, this summer will be 2021. So the middle school project will be done in 2023. So it'd be the next year, probably at the earliest, that you'd be starting the next school. That can be any one of those three schools, probably be your next priority.
I saw Ms. Zeem's hand.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Just one more. When I'm looking here at Birch Hill, that's still open concept. When they do these renovations, that won't be changed?
This number did account for closing both Birch Hill and Maine Dunstable in to regular classrooms.
Yes, that will be a blessing. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment or question? Ms. Giglio?
I have a comment and a question. I'm really stunned by the deferred maintenance. I mean, I've lived in my home for 35 years. I'm glad I didn't have that much deferred maintenance, or I probably would be out on the street by now, but.
You probably took care of it.
Yeah, that's the thing, I don't defer it. Okay, but I have a question that I was going to bring up at the JSSBC, but it's pertinent to this. In my school district that I worked in before as a school librarian, we added a whole building. We added a new library to the school midway through the time I worked there. And it was amazing. But they had something at the end called a punch list, which is, and I had that when I had renovations in my house too, which you go through and you make sure that everything you've paid for has been actually done to the way you expect it to be. And after we moved into the library, there were issues that, although they had been signed off on, that there kept being problems, especially with HVAC, that went on for more than a year or two. I'm sure your department is so busy, but I know you all check this out when I'm thinking of the new construction. But do we have some kind of guarantee over a period of time with new construction that if something looks fine when they go through the punch list, but 2 months later it's not what it should have been, do they take care of it, or do our people have to take
Generally speaking, it's a year warranty.
a year warranty? Okay, thank
There
you.
are some systems a little bit longer than that, but like the roofing systems, when we have a roof put on, minimum we should be doing is 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the things we do in addition to the punch list is we hire a separate contractor, which a joint special will be probably taking up next month, to commission, they call it commissioning. So they go through all the mechanical systems, fine tooth comb, make sure they're actually doing what the specification called them to do. well, it's well worth its money. It's another set of eyes on a project.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments for Mr. Smith? Thank you very much, Mr. Smith.
We'll get the correct spreadsheet to you, I'm sure.
Okay. I'd also like to say that Superintendent Mosley has joined us. Dr. Mosley is here. And next on our agenda is Mr. McCulkin, and please correct me if I McQuilkin, I apologize. McQuilkin. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Mike McQuilkin, Nashua Technology Center Director, Nashua South. It's great to be here tonight. I thought it'd be useful to start to talk a little bit about our programs and sort of give an overview of the Nashua Technology Center, especially for our new board members. So I have a quick little presentation. So up on the board here, you see some of our students in action. Up in the top left, you see one of our CAD students in our CAD program. Over to the top right, one of our video productions crew, hard at work. Bottom left, our manufacturing, one of our manufacturing students. And over to the far right there, our electrical technology students, hard at work in their programs. And I thought it would be best to sort of talk about NTC versus CTE. We have some different acronyms out there, and just to sort of describe them. So we are, as a whole department, we're known as the Nashua Technology Center, and that encompasses all of our programs, all of our courses. So in terms of NTC, we have feeder courses such as woodworking, electrical, some of our foods classes, and those are feeders into our more specialized CTE programs. So refer to them as NTC courses, but then we have our specialized career and technical education programs. Most of those programs are 2-year programs that are federally funded by the Perkins Grant. Most offer certifications and a lot of skills for our students to make sure that they're career ready. So I was going to walk you through a little bit about how CTE runs in Nashua. Before I continue, does anyone have any questions about the difference when I say CTE and NTC? I thought that might be a good way to start. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, my beginning goal here is to look at what is CTE, why is CTE important, and how does CTE operate here in Nashua? How does career and technical education operate here in Nashua? So CTE is career and technical education, and we're trying to eliminate the stigma of the old vocational education. We're trying to get the word out there that our programs offer skills and certifications for our students to go right into the real world and right into careers, right into college. Nowadays, with the cost of college being so sky high, we want to make sure that our students know all the availability and all the available programs that they can take in our schools. CTE provides a mix of 21st century skills, technical skills, and core academic knowledge. We partner with post-secondary institutions. We also partner with several industry partners. And the pictures here on this page, you see our preschool program. We have a fully functioning preschool at Nashua South. And down below, that's our engineering students who are participating in a robotics competition outside last spring. Next, I want to take a look at why is CTE important, and again, a passion of mine. I have a saying when I get in front of a group of students that if you're a CTE student in Nashua, you stand out. And you stand out because of the opportunities you have to gain certifications, to gain certain skills. Most of our programs, and I'll talk about this a little later, offer college credit while you're in high school. So there are so many opportunities if you're a CTE student, and that's sort of been our saying these past couple of years when we go into our CTE classrooms. If you're a CTE student in Nashua, you're going to stand out, and you're going to stand out because of all these opportunities we're going to give to you. And one of my big things is when I go talking to younger students and talking to them about CTE, I'm very nervous the kids aren't aware of these programs, and I want to really get the word out that they have these options in high school to take these programs while they're with us. Just a couple of numbers that are interesting. CTE students are more likely to finish high school. They have a vision. Almost 100% finish high school. Almost 80% enroll in post-secondary. So again, sort of starting that vision. Here in Nashua, our Nashua Technology Center, we have 18 total programs split between Nashua North and Nashua South. And of course, North students are able to take South programs, and South students are able to go to North to take North programs as well. Just getting into the college credit piece, this is a newer piece for CTE. But of our 18 programs, we offer around 106 college credits for our high school students. That gets them off to a great start if they're thinking of going to college. And again, trying to eliminate that stigma of the old, Voc Tech model where there wasn't much rigor, in these classes, in these programs, and there is. And the programs are held to a standard, and they're held to a standard, making sure that the colleges are looking at the syllabus and that the programs are rigorous enough where the kids can earn those credits. And these are the programs at both campuses. So once again, we have 18 total programs. Some are identical. We have marketing programs at both North and South. We have accounting programs at both North and South. We have business finance at both North and South. But most of the programs are at either North or South. South, we have most of the trades programs, which are HVAC, construction, electrical. We also have our STEM programs, our manufacturing, CAD, engineering. Over at North, of course, they have culinary arts, automotive, graphic design. And, I got to tell you, when you see these spaces, that's when your jaw drops in awe at, how wonderful these spaces are. And because we have the ability to have federal funds, the theory is that these students are going to be going into this career field. So that we want to make sure that the funds are put into this program so the students are working on the latest and greatest. So when they're in the engineering classroom, they're working on the latest 3D printers. When they're in their graphic design, they're working on, the latest Apple computers. So these classrooms are rather impressive. And I know for the new board members, you guys were actually in our TV video productions studio for our, the little round robins there. Yep, put on by our students. So those are our programs. Does anyone have any questions at this point about CTE in general before I move on?
Go ahead, Ms. Ziem.
Oh, well, I ask a lot of questions. You should have been called on first.
I'm sorry, who, Ms. Timmons, I didn't see your hand.
No, thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Timmons, and then
Thank
Ms.
you, Ms.
Ziem.
Zing. Mike, I have two questions. One is, how are you getting the word out to these students? Specifically, how do the students know to take CAD, for instance? What is the mechanism of getting a student into that particular occupation?
So that's a great question. So it's been my second year in this position, and we've sort of looked at phases. And so the last couple of years, I've made sure that I've gotten in front of all of the sophomores, every single sophomore in assembly, and the freshmen. And I've been able to do that mostly at South, just because I haven't been housed at North, and doing a presentation similar to this. And we start with the freshmen. We go over all the programs. With the sophomore class, it's a little more rigorous, and we actually do what's called a sophomore showcase. And let me back up a minute. Most of our CTE courses, you start as a sophomore, and that's sort of new. It used to be just juniors and seniors because they're 2-year programs. So that's why I felt it's important to get the word out to freshmen. Now for sophomores, what we do is we do a showcase. During the showcase, each of these programs has 4 ambassadors, 4 top-notch students in the program who come up to the auditorium and give a 2-minute speech about their program to the rest of the sophomore class. It's like a 20-minute program. When that's over, it's mandatory that every single sophomore in the auditorium sign up to visit 2 of these programs during an advisory later that week, so they get that exposure. So that's a program that was started, and that's proven to be very successful. Other things, we're really looking at, logistically how to run tours. Just with the amount of middle school students, it's just hard. But I think there's something for seeing the space. I've gone out to Hollis and some of these other towns, and I've talked to them about the spaces, and, they're in awe. They love hearing about it, and I bring some of my students with me, and we do some demonstrations. But I think there's something to be said when you walk into the space, when you walk into that graphic design lab, and you see the wonderful computers and the innovation space that's in there. You're like, I want to be here. My classroom can actually look like this. So that's my goal. I'd love to see a way to get our Nashua kids, especially middle school kids, up to see these programs. But I've definitely been doing some more outreach with the area schools, because Hollis, Merrimack, Milford, they can all come to our schools. So we've been doing a lot of presentations. So does that answer?
Yes, and you did cover the exposure. So you answered both of them in one question. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because parents, if you have a 2-year program and you're leading to a certification, then the students and the parents need to know in their, early on in their, when they get to high school, because if they try to get on later on, and they might realize they can't get certification, because I know some of these courses, if they're college-bound, I know that some of the kids can still get the CTE courses, but if they're looking for certification, they really need to know early on that it's a 2-year program, so they've got to line up their courses early in their high school career to make sure they get certified. So the parents really have to know, as well as the students, if they want to get certification, that they have to get on early.
I agree, and that's one of the other things we've tried to do is meet with the 8th grade fax and tech ed teachers.
Yeah.
Who's sort of vertically aligned with us.
Right.
And getting us all in the room together. We've had 3 or 4 meetings now where we're talking the same language. And so they can go back to the middle school and say, hey, my class sort of aligns here, this is where you could go. And I think those conversations are going to be great, and be great that the middle school students start to recognize, hey, in a couple of years I want to take culinary arts, and they can start having those conversations, and I believe we can get there. It's just going to be a little bit of a process.
Yep. So I'm going to go here to Ms. Bishop, and then Ms. Giglio, and then we'll go around to Ms. Brown. And Ms. Ziem, you had a question, though, right?
I'll wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, cool.
We'll come back around. I'm sorry.
That's a good slide.
Yeah.
So this may not be the right place to pose this, but I'm wondering, the same way that I got my kids into sports was during the summer clinics that like Nashua Parks and Rec was holding, just to try it out, so you don't have to do that big, huge commitment. I think for some kids, signing up for a 2-year commitment at 14, 15, 16 is probably a big thing. Do you think the students would be receptive to, like, during the summer, try things out, like come in for a little project here and there and see if it's something that they would be interested in committing to?
That's a great question, and I do. So the past few summers, we've partnered with Power Scholars. Yep, and so Power Scholars, they've done their activities in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we actually have a CTE component. We've been able to fund that through our Perkins allocation. And so our teachers, they'll get a taste of video productions. They'll get a taste of construction. I would love, again, to expand on that and do more of a tech camp or something like that. But we're in the small stages of that, but I think that's a great idea.
And we were going around Ms. Gilio and then Ms. Brown.
Just a comment and one quick question. I did get to tour both the high schools, and I was amazed. I mean, it's been a long time since my children were in either of these schools, and most of what you offer now is not available to them, but they're in their 30s, so, yeah. But I really, that was like my favorite part of the tour, other than the music rooms. So, and my question is just if people from other communities like Hollis and Brookline are able to come to participate, do they pay us for their students to do that?
Yeah, so what happens is, yeah, for the transportation, and then the DOE actually helps supplement that fund.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Brown, next.
Yeah, first of all, I think what you've got going on, I love that you're trying to change people's idea of what's going on, and I think it would be really important to focus on parents of those younger kids, the middle schoolers, because, you know, get a little pressure from your mom and dad. That's really good. I had a really good friend of mine in college that she graduated with a LPN license out of high school and went to a four-year college. She's an attorney now, but she was getting per diem pay as a nurse while I was waiting tables, so while we were in college. So, you know, that was pretty good for her. But getting in front of parents, I think, is important. But I want to know right now how many parents or how many kids are currently taking advantage of this program, and then how many can we accommodate total currently? Are we under the certain circumstance right now?
That's a great question. 10C, yep. So if you look at Appendix 10C, so it's a two-part question, right? The enrollment plus where we could be. So if Dan gives me 10 more teachers,
Which isn't going to happen.
Laugh that loud.
I don't think we needed to hear that, we knew.
but you see, I see the program enrollment. So there's our 18 programs, and so you see we have a total of 1228. And you see the breakdown by north, south, and the A stands for area. So our area students, most are Hollis, Merrimack, we get a few from Milford. And you see some of the programs are more heavy on the area students than others. There aren't many cosmetology programs in the area, so therefore we tend to get a lot more area students in that program. Our enrollment went up about 150 students from last year, so we're hoping to continue to see that grow, especially in the trades last year. Really pushed the idea that I believe the average age in the trades right now is about 55, and they're really, really looking to get some younger kids involved in the trades, and so we really tried to push that. The other program that we're really excited about is manufacturing. I mean, there's such demand out there now in that field, and we're really looking to, tell kids that these particular skills could really set them up nicely. And we've also made some very nice industry partners, with these groups, who are looking to do internships with us and pay jobs and, come to it. Each one of these programs has to have 2 program advisory meetings a year. And that's a great way to network, with post-secondary comes in, and the industry partners, and the instructors, and myself, and it's a great way to sort of problem solve where can we go from here.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Ms. Ziem and then Ms. Johnson.
I remember in particular the hair design. I remember that they had a waiting list, and there were many who would love to go but could not because there was not space available at the time. And as I was sitting here, I was wondering how many. I think that broadcasting video also has more than they can take. Is that correct? So how many of the 18 have waiting lines that cannot be taken care of? And I guess I would also like an expansion on the question that was asked over here. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So it confused me there. So going back to, we bring in, like I remember at video when I went there to take my tour, I remember them saying that they had to, because they got a grant, I think was what he told me, that grant, because it was a federal grant, it required that it be open to other public schools in the state. Mm-hmm. And so is that always, like, I would assume the hair design is another example of that? So how many of these 18 programs have that distinguishing factor? And how many of them are waiting lines that never get to the end?
So distinguishing factor, you mean help bound by federal funds?
Yes, in other words, I think he said there was a percentage. Is it the same percentage for all of them?
So all 18 of these, because these are our CTE specialized programs, all 18 are eligible for federal funds.
And so they all are open to these other.
Yep, and all open to area schools.
So is there a
and-
percentage then that has to, is the criteria that it's a certain percentage of the 100% that you can use?
Yes, yes. So we're in what's called Region 16 for CTE. So Region 16 is Nashua, Milford, and Alvin. And myself and the two other directors get together 3 times a year, and we decide on quotas for area kids. And how many kids total, should go into a program from each school. And we came up with, for Nashua, if a class is full, the most we could take would be 3 from each area school. Now, we don't have that problem in most of our programs. I guess that's a good problem to have. That means your program is popular, but it's a very sad thing to turn kids away. The other thing that's tricky is, your question's a really good question. Because we accept federal funds, we can't use random selection when it comes to having kids go into our programs. We have to have a protocol per Perkins. So we actually have a protocol that we have to follow that relates to attendance, GPA, and a few other factors that had to be approved by the state board that looks after our federal funding. They had to approve that, and we have to use that with every single kid who applies for the program. And even with the waiting list, they get the score too. So, and it has to be that transparent, and it has to be that way. It can't just be spit out random. Now, really, the only 2 programs that have that distinction are health sciences. It's a very popular program. And the other one is automotive last year. We have a brand new automotive teacher who's doing a fantastic job in filling up the seats. But again, that's the downside of it, right? When you get full, you get a waiting list. But that's how we handle the circumstances.
So are you saying that the video as well as the hair are no longer a waiting line? That anybody who has asked for it has gotten it?
Yeah, now this is based on last year's courses.
That's wonderful.
We were able to accommodate most people.
Oh,
Yep.
I'm so glad to hear that. I
Yep.
was so heartbroken because, in my view, a lot of what you offer here are to people who will not go to college, and they frequently come out of school without a trade that they can earn a living. But those 2, thank you. That's wonderful news. I'm so glad to hear that. I am.
Yeah, because it is heartbreaking when you hear stories. I've waited 3 years to go to health sciences, and all of a sudden they don't get in, and so, but on an individual basis, if those things do come up, we try to work out a special plan for a student. Maybe there's another program they can get into and that type of thing.
Yeah. They could not, though. The other thing that concerned me was, it didn't seem to me, from what I understood anyway, that they could give value to the one who was not going to go. For instance, with the hair design, again, my thing was that if you can give a young adult a job where they will be able to support themselves, and otherwise they would not have been. That's a pretty nice gift to be. I would love to be able to give that to anybody. I would think it just excited me, and so they cannot make that distinction, though, right? If it's first come, first serve, is that what we're saying?
First come.
Well, for instance, it can't be based on who needs it the most, because they're going to be depending on that for a livelihood. It goes
by a protocol, but there are special circumstances could come up. I mean, there could, the director does reserve the right for, if there's a special circumstance where a kid needs to be moved forward for whatever reason, we take that into account, obviously.
Got it. Well,
and then that's just not just me. There'd be a team of people that would say this is the right decision.
That's also wonderful
given the
to
kid.
hear.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. I'm glad. And can I get my last question? I'm sorry. You said that there are 106, I believe, 106 college credits that they can earn in the high school.
Total for all the programs. Like, so
Yes.
for example,
So what's
careers,
the average that's why I'm asking it.
it depends on the course, and it depends on the agreement they have with their post-secondary partner. So careers in education, for example, after 2 years, they have 9 credits. You know, I believe CAD, I think they're with NHTI, I think they can have 10 credits. So it sort of depends on that. We also, this is exciting, we also have an articulation agreement with Keene State that any CTE student who finishes a 2-year program with a B or better and decides to go to Keene State gets 8 free credits to start.
Well, yeah, that's,
So these opportunities are out there. Yep,
no, that's wonderful. You guys are doing a great job. Kudos.
thank you.
Okay, I think Ms. Johnson was next, and then we'll go to Ms. Bishop.
Thank you. First of all, I want to let everybody know how professional this looks. This is really nice. This is something that you would walk into, like a company, a marketing company, and they would tell you about their business. This is just absolutely fantastic. So, and it gives such a great layout and a description of all the courses. I just want to say, I remember when we built this building, and we said what classes were going to be everywhere. Back then, we went from technical to vocational, and now here. I was one of the ones that I felt that one building had to be a technical vocational school, because I always believed that there are students that don't want to go to college, maybe want to go later on, but they want a career. And I think this whole center is marvelous, because it gives the students the opportunity that if they have an interest in electrical or cosmetology, that they can start it and finish it. Now, in the automotive, do they, and I remember when they did the automotive, because my 2 boys are mechanics. My daughter was in hospitality and tourism. You don't have that anymore, do you?
No, we don't have that program anymore.
The teacher was great.
Yeah.
Now, let's say they get into automotive, and they're in the program, and they decide they don't like it. What happens then? Can they move to another program?
Certainly, if there's room in their schedule. I mean, we have many kids who actually end up taking 2 CTE programs.
Okay.
As long as they've gotten their cores out of the way and they've passed everything else, if there's room in their schedule and we can make it work, we will.
Okay, so, and some of these, let's say the electrical, the automotive, are you partnering up with businesses so they can do internship out there? Because I know they have to be a certain age before they can actually go under a lift. I believe, was that 16 or 17 before they can go underneath the lift in the automotive?
Yeah, and we work very closely with the, the DOL, Department of Labor.
Right.
And we, one of our members of our CTE staff is always in contact with the DOL and working on possible internships and agreements. Last year, our automotive students were able to go work and do an internship for about a month, I think, at Tully Automotive. So their 4th block, they went and they did work there and then came back to report and did reflections and all that. So we're also partnering with Hitchner Manufacturing in Milford, and they're looking at taking some of our students on. In our video productions program, one of our students is actually working with BAE, and he's actually producing a live feed for BAE. Some of the BAE employees are taking a course, and the live feeds from New York, the students from New York, and so the Nashua students are actually producing and directing that course, for the students. So, and if that's a paid internship, and they were so happy they came. Mr. McQuilkin, I now have a clearance. So.
And that's wonderful. And, I think this program gives a lot of kids the hope, because, some kids don't do well in school because it doesn't pique their interest for whatever reason. And when you put them into programs, that's really going to pique their interest. My attitude's always been you can do anything in life that you want to, as long as you put your mind to it. And there's a lot of kids out there that need that little boost, and sometimes a relationship in a program like this just gives them what they need. So I think this is a very worthwhile program. Thank you.
Ms. Bishop?
to go right off of that, I was wondering if we offered them opportunities, I'm looking at the budget that we were just looking at that Mr. Smith brought us, would they work on our fleet of maintenance vehicles, helping out with electric, HVAC? Would there be opportunities for them to practice their skills on their own environment?
It depends. So we have worked on some mini projects with Sean and with Gary Connors. You know, that's a tricky one, given contracts and all that, in union, yeah. It's a but the students have worked, the students were allowed to work hand in hand on a number of projects once, you know, once the certain infrastructure was put up. For example, we built a greenhouse at South. It was a collaborative project between our foods teacher, our woodworking teacher, HVAC and electrical. You know, and many of those students, once the infrastructure was put up, you know, by, you know, Sean's staff, they were able to, you know, put a lot of the wiring in and the heating system. And so those types of things do happen.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has a comment or question?
I would just like to say, expanding on that, they used to have the project where they actually bought land and built houses, and they built it from scratch and sold them, and I think they actually made money. It was a wonderful program, it really was. But thank you for your contribution to our children.
Yep, you're welcome. So I had one more piece to actually talk about related to our Careers in Ed program. So I want to start by saying our Careers in Ed program is, in my opinion, the best in the state. I mean, if you look at the demographic sheet, Appendix 10C, it shows the enrollment for Careers in Education. Always have high enrollment. The way that program works, the first year students do related work in the classroom, and then they actually get to do an internship in the preschool, the fully functioning preschool, working with our community children. The second year, they get to actually go out into the community, and they're interns in our elementary schools. What a great experience. And we've actually talked about ways, how can we get these students to stay in Nashua and become our future teachers and that type of thing. So it's such a great program. And again, you look across the state, several states still have their Careers in Ed program, but they're dropping their preschool because they just can't fund it. And we're unique here in that we have 2 certified teachers in our CTE program, but for one of our additional needs, we are requesting an increase in the salary for our preschool director position. The preschool director works in this program along with the other 2 certified teachers. This position is a non-affiliated position, so it's not a union position, and it's paid through the special revenue. So it's not in the regular budget. It's paid directly out of the special revenue account for the preschool. So as I said, during year 1 of the Career in Education program, the high school students work as interns in our fully functioning preschool, and it's a fantastic experience. The preschool director works with both the high school and the preschool students in their academic environments. She's essentially a college supervisor as our Careers in Education students are training to become teachers. She works with them to create lesson plans and bring STEM into the classroom. She has to make sure that IEPs are followed, and she's an integral part of what I consider the best Careers in Education program in the state by far. She's responsible for, or the position is responsible for recruitment, enrollment, and communication with stakeholders, you know, including parents and other educators. And as you can see from your other appendix item, our enrollment has been increasing in the past 7 years since our current director, Nicole Robinson, was hired. I'm asking that if we could increase her salary due to the growing demands of this position and what she's taken on, the number of students, how robust this program has become. And one of the things that I would like to request is we have a line item in special revenue of about $3,700, and it's a line item just for equipment. And historically speaking, we've never used that line item for equipment for the preschool because we've been able to sustain that through our local operating budget. So any equipment needs by the preschool, we've been able to subsidize through our operating budget. So I'm wondering if there's a way that that line item could be transferred to her salary, perhaps, and then perhaps an additional 3,500 or so to move her up into the 34, 35 range, which is in line with many of the other non-affiliated positions. Again, this is not out of the local operating budget. This just comes out of the special revenue budget for the preschool. So she's not out of the regular budget.
Ms. Brown, and then Ms. Ziem.
Is she currently receiving retirement or other benefits?
She does receive benefits. I'm not 100% sure if she's in the pension or not, but she does receive medical and dental and those sorts of benefits.
Ms. Ziem?
I'm wondering what her qualifications are. Is she, does she have a diploma? Is she a high school graduate?
Yep.
What are the,
She has her bachelor's degree.
she has a bachelor's degree. But she's not a teacher, and that's how they're able to get away with paying her less than the beginning salary of a teacher? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, well, the position was always set as a preschool director and non-affiliated, so they didn't, this position didn't have to be a certified teacher, and we're okay with it not being certified. I'm just wondering with the extra duties, if there's a way to compensate her a little bit more with the revenue.
Ms. Oden?
Thank you. I've worked with Nicole. I served on a committee, a preschool committee with her when we were looking at some of the assessments we wanted to do. She's an outstanding worker, very knowledgeable, and she certainly is underpaid for what she does. So I think this would be a very smart way to say to somebody, we appreciate what you do. She takes the lead. If you look at the website, that's the person you call when you want to go into, have your child go into the program. She has her degree, and she's an extremely hard worker. Very knowledgeable, does well with the kids and with the students. I've had several students that are in this program. I've seen some of them go on to college and then go into the teaching career. So, but I personally have worked with Nicole, and I support this wholeheartedly. It's long overdue. Thank you.
Ms. Ziem?
This is another question, would it be advisable, if indeed we ended up doing this, to have her job description? I like the idea that they have, maybe it's not a good idea, but I like the idea that she has a degree. I think she's a program director. All our program directors, for the most part, I think, are well educated. And so it seems to me, it's just a thought, but if I were going to vote for this, and it sounds, and based on Mrs. Oden, I would follow her anywhere. I tell you that honestly. Having said that, I would like to see the job description include, you hear what I'm saying? So that's just a food for thought that we can think of before we get to the final headache. Thank you.
Okay, great. Ms. Bishop?
Is there a reason she's not on regular teacher? She's not a regular teacher in the district?
So the position is not a teacher position. It is to support the CTE program as a non-affiliated staff member. But what is
its own separate entity?
Yeah,
Okay.
and what has happened though is that couple of things. The program has grown, which is a great thing, and Nicole has helped with that. The other thing that's happened is the program has aligned itself with post-secondary partners, and now there's running start credit and competencies that need to be met. So she's taken on, that position has taken on an integral part of that. So I think the duties have expanded somewhat. But the position has never been a certified position. It's just been a non-affiliated staff member.
Is there anyone else who has any comments or questions for Mr. McQuilkin? Go ahead, Ms. Giulio.
I was working at Mount Pleasant as a long-term library sub until December 20th, and I had the pleasure of having one of the interns work through Mrs. Loftus. And it actually was an amazing experience for me, too, to just watch this person grow and understand and interact with the children. So I think it's a wonderful program.
Yeah, so Ms. Loftus runs the second year of the program, and she oversees the interns in the elementary schools. And many of her former students are now the cooperating teachers who are looking after our current students. And I had the privilege this year of walking around and seeing some of the students, and I was shocked that I saw a student of mine who graduated a few years ago who is now a music teacher. I was like, what are you doing here? It's great. So it's great to see our kids, our Nashua kids, staying in Nashua, going back and teaching in Nashua. It's a great feeling. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
We're at the bottom of the agenda right now, and I don't know if there's any other business that the Budget Committee needs to conduct, or if anyone has any more questions or comments. I think we're done for the evening. Our next budget meeting, according to the schedule. Oh, wait, we have one more question.
Well, yeah,
Go ahead,
always
Ms.
another one from me. I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
Well, I missed the last meeting. I apologize to all of you. I try not to miss especially budget meetings because they are such an important part of our responsibilities. But I'm wondering, there were certain documents that I wanted. Do we submit, and it may probably are already in this book, but is that part of the process when you come to the meeting? If there's anything you want, you ask for it?
Yeah, I don't know if it's part of the process, but we've been certain information people have been asking for, and so far administration's been very good at giving, answering questions or coming forth with some information. Mr.
Yes,
Dunn?
and I'm creating a list. I have some things tonight. I had a couple things from the first meeting, so we'll be getting those out. Right now, it's sort of a busy time getting all the presentations done, but we'll be getting answers to all the questions probably within a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And then going forward, we'll try to answer the week after.
I'll save mine to give you a break.
Well, the sooner you give it, the better, the more time we have to do it.
Well, you probably already have it. I just always like the list of out-of-district costs in particular,
You'll get that next week with, next week we have ELL and special education. So that list will be part of special education.
And the other thing that I was interested in was, again, I have this thing that because charter schools, we compete somewhat, in my view, public education and charter schools. So any information you have on those actual costs, I keep hearing, it depends on who you talk to. Those figures seem to fluctuate greatly. And I just wanted to have in my own mind an accurate, that's why I was asking the question earlier tonight about the actual cost of the transportation, because I wanted to be able to say, document A, this is what per student the public kid gets, and this total, not, if you don't get the total, then it's not honest, is it? So that would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Administration has, Mr. Donovan's been really great for getting us the information we need. And I want to thank all the presenters tonight, Mr. McQuilkin, Mr. Smith, and Mr. Rossio. Just remember that, administration, they have a district to run. As long as we keep our questions and requests reasonable, I think there's no problem. They've been very good being transparent and getting us the information we need. So thank you very much, Mr. Donovan, Dr. Mosley, and Mr. McQuilkin, and the other speakers tonight. And I just want to say, if there's no other business tonight, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned at 8:27 p.m.